Okay, fantastic. Today's show is going to be absolutely unbelievable. We've got Dalton Brough on the show. He is the head of HR at Neighbor. Neighbor is actually a really fascinating company. Dalton, maybe you can share with us a little bit more about what Neighbor does, what Neighbor is, and some of the exciting things that you guys have on the docket.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Jeremy. It's always good to reconnect with you. I'm excited to be here. So, yeah, Neighbor is a peer-to-peer marketplace disrupting the storage industry. So, most of your listeners have probably heard of Airbnb and Uber and DoorDash. These are all peer-to-peer marketplaces that have disrupted their respective industries. Airbnb disrupted the hospitality industry, and Uber disrupted transportation. We have a similar business model to them. We're just going after the old, archaic, traditional storage industry. People don't realize how big the storage industry
Storage
is.
is storage is huge. I'm really excited about this. This is great.
Yeah. In fact, kind of a leading question, but I'll start just with a trivia question for you, Jeremy. What is the largest company headquartered in Utah in terms of valuation? What's your guess?
The largest company in terms of valuation. So it's got to be some kind of a storage company then is my guess, because
Yes,
since you're leading
I
here.
prompted it a little bit. Yes.
I'm
Uh-huh.
trying to think of the storage company that is the big one here. I've got a few friends that work there. What is the storage company called?
Yeah. So Extra Space
Extra
Storage.
Space. That's right.
Yep.
Extra Space.
Yep.
Yes.
As you've been driving along I-15, or if you have listeners outside of Utah, I'm sure that they've seen Extra Space storage units as well.
Yeah.
They're all over the place. They're the second largest storage company in the entire world. And they are headquartered right here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Their valuation ranges from anywhere from like $20 to $25 billion, depending on the day. Whenever I ask candidates that question, common guesses are Qualtrics or Vivint
Yeah.
or Intermountain Healthcare, right? All really good guesses, but Qualtrics is the second largest company headquartered in Utah, and Extra Space is somewhere between 3 to 4 times bigger than them in terms of
Wow.
valuation. And so, yeah, people don't realize how massive this industry is. They've got storage units have a 96% occupancy rate across the United States. And I think what's especially intriguing about that industry is as we're heading into a recession, transition is what creates demand for storage. And during a recession, there's a lot of transition going on. People are downsizing their homes. People are getting laid off, and so they need to move. But people have a really hard time parting ways with their belongings, and so storage continues to be a really in-demand industry. And so, yeah, it's a fascinating place to be. And I think the other part of our business model that is really intriguing, that differentiates us from other traditional storage units, is this passive income model, right? We're giving people an opportunity to earn this extra money on the side. So if you get laid off from a job, you still have an opportunity to earn money through Neighbor. That's something that traditional storage units can't offer. And so I think it creates just this really compelling, opportunity for both supply, which is the space that's being listed on our platform, and the demand, which is the people that need to rent that space. It creates this perfect storm, and it's been a really exciting journey so far. It's kind of fun. In Utah, we have a lot of B2B SaaS companies, a lot of
Yeah.
great software companies. It's kind of fun to step into a different business model and to be a part of, a marketplace.
Well, and to consider how big the space, the market is for storage, from
Yeah.
what you described, that's phenomenal. There's a huge opportunity to innovate and disrupt, and that's exactly what Neighbor's doing. That's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, so um, maybe just one more question about the business model. You said like anybody that has space can store things through Neighbor. So I
Yeah.
mean, can it be anything like I've got an extra closet that I can store stuff in, or an extra garage, or I've got an RV pad that I could store somebody's RV on? Is it anything and everything, or what does that look like?
Yep, all of the above, anything and everything. If it's on your property, you can list it. The majority of our listings right now are kind of parking, so RV pads, driveways, garages. But for us to continue to grow and to succeed, we definitely want to get more self-storage supply on our platform. So, that would be basements and closets and bedrooms and things inside of your house that can truly replace like a traditional storage unit. We've seen a lot of success there for sure. But yeah, I think for us to really like take it to the next level, we need to get even more supply for self-storage there. So yeah, if you have extra space and you want to earn some passive income, check out neighbor.com. And I will say, this is the most passive form of passive income, right? With Airbnb or Uber, you actually have to like, work for that money. With Neighbor, you list it, people will come and drop their things off at your house, and you probably won't hear from them for months at a time, because, that's just kind of the nature of storage, right? You just kind of like drop it off and forget about it until you need it a year down the road or whatever it is. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great business model. Well, really cool. So, going back to you and being head of HR at Neighbor, you came in initially to Neighbor over all of recruiting, and now you've recently been promoted into head of HR at Neighbor. So tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, I came up through recruiting, and I'm very much still a recruiter at heart. And the biggest part of my job still is overseeing the recruiting function and actually executing on recruiting related tasks. I've been recruiting now for almost 6 years. I started at a small startup here in Utah called Jolt, was there for 4 years, started as employee 40 there, and we grew that company to about 160 employees. And then I went to Pluralsight, which is where I was able to work with you for about 6 months. It was an incredible experience for me to see how, a company that's already reached scale, how they approach talent acquisition. And that was such a great learning experience for me. But Neighbor came calling, and I actually joined Neighbor as employee 41. So started Jolt as 40. Started at Jolt as 40 and started at Neighbor as employee 41. And so very familiar with this stage of company. I love working in startups. But what my job looks like today, now, like you said, I started as the lead recruiter here, was kind of building out the recruiting function here at Neighbor. And a few months ago, my old boss, Nathan, departed, started his executive coaching business. Super sad to see him go, but really excited to take on some additional responsibility. And I'm really grateful to Neighbor for giving me the opportunity to step into that role and to take on some additional responsibilities there. So yeah, now I'm overseeing everything related to HR, of course, recruiting, but people operations, IT, systems administration, employee relations, compensation, benefits, performance management, office management, you name it. Where I'm now working to oversee the entire employee experience from the second that they apply to the second that they put in their notice and walk out the door. So yeah, that's a little bit about my role today.
That's awesome. There's a lot of breadth and depth in all of that, and Neighbor definitely has the right person in the job. So that's awesome. A little personal question for you, Dalton. I ask all of my guests what their favorite band is or artist. So I'm really curious to hear who yours is.
Yeah, I love music. So my wife and I, we have very different tastes in music, and I think we identified that. We didn't realize that while we were dating. We realized that after we got married. And so we actually have like a playlist that's called Switzerland, because it's like the music that we both like. That's like what we listen to on road trips and stuff. But yeah, I have a very eclectic taste in music. Some days it's like I'm listening to Hamilton or Hadestown or other like Broadway musicals. Other days I'm listening to like Drake and Lil Wayne and like other hip hop and rap artists. But I think like if I had to pick one artist, I'd probably say John Mayer. Like he's such an incredibly talented musician. He is like the most frequented artist on our Switzerland playlist. So my wife and I both really, really like him. We were able to see him here in Salt Lake City back in March. So
yeah, I was gonna say, is he on the Switzerland playlist? But obviously, yes. So there's some good balance there. So that's good.
Definitely. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Well, so kind of the drill on the questions. I typically talk about the secrets or the tips and advice you have for candidates, and then hiring managers, and then the recruiting team. But let's start off with the candidates. What secrets do you feel like candidates need to know that will really help them be eminently successful going through the interview process or the hiring process?
Yeah. Definitely. So I'll begin by saying this. As I was preparing to come on this podcast, I went back and I listened to a couple previous episodes. I listened to Colton Richen's episode. Colton is a good friend of mine, and the first tip that he offered, or secret that he offered for candidates, was the first one that I was going to offer, and then I had a thought to myself, well, if he's already shared this, it's probably not so much a secret, but I can at least share a little bit of advice there. But what I'll say is this. So there's a person that I follow on Twitter. He's a local product management leader here in the community. His name is Gentry Davies, and he has some really good thoughts on this. He kind of framed it with this phrase: think calculus, not statistics. And he even admits himself that it's not a perfect analogy, but I do love the message behind it. And it's basically this: as you're applying for jobs, it would be, I think most people would assume that it makes the most sense to just, take a shotgun approach and just apply to as many jobs as possible. That's the statistics way of approaching a job search. The more applications that you submit, the odds of you getting an interview and eventually getting a job would be greater, because statistics would show that that's more likely to happen. This is where the think calculus part of this comes into play. I actually believe that that's not true. I think that the less places that you apply, or rather the less places that you apply where you can actually focus and give all of your attention to, the greater your odds are of getting a job. And so it's far more important to invest a lot of your time and effort into a smaller amount of opportunities that you think you are more uniquely qualified for, than to just, apply for as many as possible and see what sticks. And so some ways to increase your odds of getting interviews would include doing an insane amount of research on the company where you are applying, on the team that you're interviewing with, on the job specifically that you're applying for.
Yeah.
All of these things are extremely important. And the more that you can show in your initial interview and in subsequent interviews that you have done that insane amount of research, I think the better your odds are that you will actually get a job.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think it goes both for internal candidates that are at the company that you work at today, or external candidates. A lot of times, over my career as well, you'll see, especially for internal candidates, you'll see names that will pop through for every single job, and who these people are, and that, they're applying for jobs that are way outside of their skills and capabilities and outside of their league, but then they're also applying for everything else in between. And it actually does them a disservice. I don't think people realize what kind of disservice they're doing themselves by applying to so many different jobs. But a piece of advice that I would give job seekers, especially internal ones, is not only doing the research, like you said, on a specific role that you have the skill set for, or maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but then also to go to that team or that department or the leader of that group and say, hey, I've got some extra time. I'd love to come and help support this team. I'd love to get to know you guys better. I'd love to do side by sides with you. Obviously making sure that you clear it with your current leader, and see if there's an opportunity for a development opportunity within that other department. And then you can showcase what you can do, and they may have never even considered you because they don't know you. They don't know what you're capable of. But if you're able to go in, spend some time with them, show them what you can do and add value, figure out how to solve problems for that group, the likelihood of being able to get that job is going to be much higher. And obviously that's an internal perspective view, and there's a variety of things you could do from external as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing I'll add to that, Jeremy. So one of my favorite things to do with every single candidate that applies to Neighbor, I have this kind of curated list of like links and resources that I love to send our candidates when they apply, because I want them to, learn a little bit more about Neighbor and our culture and everything. But I specifically don't send that email. I intentionally don't send that email until after they've done their phone interview with me. because I want to see before a phone interview, like how much research they've done on their own. I want to be able to gauge like what is their interest level, how interested are they really in Neighbor, or are they just interested in a job, and so I send that email afterwards so that I can kind of assess that on my own. And so that is something that recruiters really do care about. If you're a candidate, we are looking at least I am looking to see, what you know about Neighbor, what you know about this job, and why you're specifically interested in this opportunity. Of all the places where you could have submitted an application, why did you apply to this job in particular?
Yeah, that's really great advice. So, the takeaway here is the calculus statistics rule. Make sure that you are calculated and precision and targeted in your approach versus the
Yeah.
shotgun spray and pray that you're going to get a job.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
love that.
exactly.
Thanks for that advice. All right, let's shift gears a little bit to hiring managers. Hiring managers play such a massive role in the hiring process. And what advice do you have for them? Where have you seen hiring managers be really successful from certain tips or advice that you'd share?
Yeah. I have a lot of passion about this. I love the best part of my job. Well, I think the best part of any recruiter's job is of course like extending and closing offers, right? But one of the things that I love about recruiting that I wasn't expecting is working with hiring managers. And so I actually have two secrets, and these I would consider more secrets than just tips. Like I don't know if people really think about these things as much as they should. But my first secret here is the more that you offload so the more that a hiring manager offloads to their recruiting partner, the more time that the hiring manager will actually spend recruiting. I think most leaders understand that a large part of their job is going to be spent recruiting. I don't know if hiring managers recognize like just how much time should be spent recruiting and how much effort they really should be applying towards it. I think any leadership position job posting out there should include a bullet point under the responsibilities that says recruit and retain a world-class team.
Yeah.
I think we need to be more clear about what the job description of a leader is. Your job is to recruit. Now, the recruiter facilitates the process and can help, provide a great candidate experience for your candidates and everything. They're going to execute the process. Their job is to close the candidates, but your job is to, help the recruiter to be successful by being as involved as possible. You don't want a candidate to accept a job offer because they got along really well with the recruiter. You want them to accept a job offer because of the relationship that they built with the hiring manager, because that's the relationship that matters. The relationship between the boss and the new hire. And so one example that I'll give of this. So something that we've done at Neighbor, that I've implemented at Neighbor, is when it comes to sourcing candidates, and when I say sourcing, I'm meaning like actually sending messages to passive candidates, like on LinkedIn or some other source. When it comes to sourcing passive candidates, at Neighbor, the hiring managers are the ones that actually send those messages. I think most companies, that's something that's offloaded to the recruiter themselves to actually send that message, because that's the recruiter's job, right? But the odds of a candidate responding to a message are far greater when the hiring manager is the one that sends that message and does the initial like sales call to get them in the funnel, than the odds are if the recruiter is the one to send the message. We've seen incredible success with having our hiring managers actually be the one to source candidates, because candidates are more engaged. They're more interested in talking to the CFO of Neighbor than they are, to talk with a recruiter at Neighbor. They can ask more specific questions about the role and the team. Good recruiters have a good understanding of the role and the team, but will never be able to get as deep as the hiring manager themselves. And at the end of the day, it's said all the time when it comes to retaining employees. Employees don't leave a company, they leave their boss. Well, I think the same is true on the other end. Employees join a company because of the boss. And so the quicker that we can build a relationship between the candidate and the hiring manager in the process, the better. And so that's my first secret for hiring managers.
you and I sat down for breakfast multiple months ago, and you shared a little bit of this secret, and I was really intrigued by it because it's really actually revolutionary. Because typically in organizations that outreach is done by sourcers or recruiters, and you've kind of spun that on its head to say, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way to get better traction with candidates? And the data is showing you that yes, yeah, if you get hiring managers to reach out, the candidate's more likely to reach back out. So I
Yeah.
think if more people, more companies were to implement an approach like you do, I think they'd see really great success. Can you share a little bit of how you helped the leadership team, come to grips with that being a responsibility for a hiring manager? Because I think a lot of times, if a company is going to try to do this, this is probably the biggest barrier that they'll face. Will be like, well, that's not my job. My job is just I'm a leader. I'm not the recruiter. That's the recruiting team. So I'm curious, like, how did you go about that?
Yeah, yeah, excellent question. So, number one, it starts with buy-in from the leadership team. Especially like the executive leadership team, right? This was one of the biggest things that drew me to Neighbor in the first place, was just their commitment to recruiting. And I feel like what I shared earlier about recruiting is every leader's part of their job description. Like, that was clear and evident to me that the leadership team at Neighbor shared that sentiment. So I already had that buy-in, but the biggest barrier to entry is like to actually get the hiring managers to sending the messages and getting involved that way, is the tools that you use. So I specifically created, or rather the tools that we implemented here at Neighbor, from a recruiting standpoint, we implemented them because they were easy to use and they worked seamlessly together. So for instance, we use LinkedIn Recruiter to build our projects, just like literally every other company. They use LinkedIn Recruiter or LinkedIn
Sure.
Recruiter Lite. And then we use a simple sourcing tool or messaging tool called HireFlow, to actually distribute those messages. They capture the email addresses for the candidates, and it's very, very cheap to use. And so that's one clarification that I want to make is, it's not to say that the hiring managers are the ones responsible for going and building the pipeline. As the recruiter, I feel like that is still my job.
Sure.
is to run the Boolean searches in LinkedIn and to build the talent pool. And that way I have a little bit more control on, building a diverse talent pool from which to source from. And so then all the hiring manager has to do is, go into the project. They have access to the project in LinkedIn Recruiter, and there's a Chrome extension. They just send the message. We build the campaign with them, and they shoot those messages off. It usually only takes a hiring manager 30 to 60 minutes to actually like send all the messages to the 20 or so candidates that we're trying to target. But the job of the recruiter becomes enabling the hiring managers to be successful there, and to have as minimal friction as possible with actually like getting into the tools and sending the messages.
It's amazing, like when you can get the leadership bought into something, like how much easier it makes your job, and how much better it makes kind of the engagement and everything. I remember when I was going to work at Pluralsight, one of the things that got me really excited about wanting to go there is the CEO, Aaron Sconard, was all about, recruiting was the most important thing to him. It was one of the top priorities for the company. And it wasn't just that he said that, because I think a lot of times leaders say that, oh yeah, recruiting is really important and we've got to do this. Yeah. But he really meant it. And he put his money where his mouth was. And we got new ATS systems, different technologies. Anytime we needed a recruiter or we needed a resource, obviously we'd have to present the case as to why it made sense. And we would never be like overly, trying to get more headcount than we needed. But he always got it and always was supportive and would buy in. And that makes, when you have leader at the top that, supports you in that way, recruiting can be eminently successful. And it sounds like that's the experience that you have at Neighbor as well right now with the leadership team.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like I kind of like sold myself short a little bit. Like, I shouldn't say that I didn't have to do anything to get buy-in from the leadership team. Like, I remember having these discussions with them early on after I started, and it kind of started out like, let's give it a shot, like let's try it out. And the two data points that really moved the needle for us was our CFO ran a search for a controller, and of the 50 messages that he sent, we had a 68% response rate on those messages. Generally, a recruiter is going to get anywhere from 25 to 40% response rate, right? And so he got a 68% response rate. Levi Lindsay, our creative director, when he was hiring his graphic designer, he got a 75% response rate. And so that very simply showed everybody that, like, yeah, there's a better way to do this. And when we had that data to support that hypothesis, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Well,
You said you had maybe a second secret for hiring.
yeah, just really quick. Prior to coming to Neighbor, I had this opinion that reference checks were a waste of time, and that, like, it's basically, we're asking candidates to give us paid advertising on themselves, right? Like, go find somebody that's going to give you this glowing review, and we'll give them a call and, ask these simple questions. I just felt like it was a waste of time, and we weren't going to actually get any data point. Something that, like, the leadership team at Neighbor, specifically Joseph Woodbury, our CEO, has taught me is that reference checks are one of the most important data points in the hiring process. And so I would encourage hiring managers everywhere, if you share that opinion that I had prior to Neighbor, to rethink that and to give reference checks another shot. Yes, we're asking the candidates to provide a reference that they've already kind of signed off on and said, and they feel confident that they're going to give us good data. But especially, like, if you can get on the phone with the former manager of that candidate, if you ask the right questions, you can get incredible data points. Ask them about where they excel, ask them about things that were on their most recent performance review, so that we can know, what gaps we may need to address as we're bringing them into this role. You can ask them a little bit more about, what they need to be successful and how we can create an environment where they can succeed. Things like that. I think it's important to just ask better, more specific questions. Don't look at it as an opportunity to just get a ringing endorsement from their previous manager. Look at it as an opportunity to get more data points and to ask specific questions to better understand the candidate so that you can help them be successful.
All right, let's shift gears to the recruiting team. One thing that I've heard from a lot of different people on the recruiting team, whether you're a coordinator, sourcer, recruiter, leader, there's not a lot of help out there for the recruiting team in enhancing and building their skills. And so what I really like this question, being able to ask HR professionals, so that other people can get different skills and learnings from this. So what secrets do you have for the recruiting team?
Yeah. I think the first thing is, recruiting isn't rocket science. Actually, one of my, like, kind of mentors in the recruiting world, I think he was actually a former coworker of yours at eBay. Brian Bailey is his name. He's an old friend from Arizona, but he shared that with me when I was early on in recruiting, just that recruiting isn't rocket science. And things that I've learned as I've been a recruiter over the last 6 years is, candidates want transparency, and they want updates. They want to know where they stand, and you might think, oh, well, transparency and being kept in the loop, like, those are the same thing. Not necessarily. You can give an update, but not be very transparent. Sometimes recruiters will just reach out and say, like, hey, I don't have an update for you, or this is where, we don't have a decision yet. It'll be a couple more days. That's not transparent. That's giving an update. I think it's important to help candidates understand where they stand truly. Where are they at in the process? How many other candidates are interviewing? Like, they want to know, they want transparency around compensation. Like, let's be open and transparent about what our range is and what our range isn't, and explain the methodology behind how we arrive at compensation figures. Things like that. A kind of sub point to that is, back to the point about, like, recruiting isn't rocket science. You'd be amazed at how many candidates, when they accept offers here at Neighbor, how many of them talk about the very simple touch points that we offered throughout the process that really like moved the needle for them. So for instance, one thing that we do here at Neighbor, we're predominantly on site in person. We don't do a lot of remote work. And so pretty much all of our interviews for local candidates are held on site. And so one very simple thing that we do is every candidate that comes in to interview, we write their name on the whiteboard. We'll say, welcome, Jeremy, and we'll write out their agenda for that interview. And I think just the message that communicates to candidates is, wow, like these people have been expecting me, like they're prepared for me, and we're ready to like have a formal interview here for this position. I've had several candidates, when they accepted their offer, we asked them, what did it come down to for you? And they'll say, it was just the little details about, like even writing my name on the whiteboard. Or one other simple thing that I do, I use Loom videos for like everything when it comes to recruiting. I use it to source candidates. I use it to give a candidate an update. Sometimes I'll give a candidate like a 5-minute overview of their upcoming interview and help them prepare for the interview by giving them some insight into the people that they're meeting with. Loom videos have been an incredible tool for me with recruiting. And the reason why that's not rocket science is it's just these simple things that people kind of overlook. But people want to be kept in the loop. People want transparency. And if you can do those things, and if you can move efficiently through the process, odds are you're going to find success as a recruiter.
All right, Dalton, my last and final question for you is more, around your superpower. Like what superpower do you feel like you've gained over your career that has helped you be most successful?
Yeah. Jeremy, have you ever done StrengthsFinder before?
Yeah.
Do you know what your strengths are?
My top 5 are? Yeah.
What are they?
So mine, achiever, positivity. What are my other ones?
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I'm just strategic, innovative. Anyway, those are like my top 4.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. We share positivity. That's my number 2 as well. Yeah, so the number 1 superpower that I think that like has enabled me to be successful and that has like shaped my career is that I found a career where I could utilize my greatest strengths every single day. And so I'm a big fan of StrengthsFinder. My number 1 strength is Woo, WOO, which when I first found that out, I was actually really embarrassed about that. It just makes it sound like I'm just this, smooth talker, right? But in the book StrengthsFinder, it talks about how people, or rather Woo stands for winning others over.
Yeah.
And the other really cool thing about StrengthsFinder is it gives like specific career advice for people with that strength. And so one of the things that it says in the career advice section for Woo is find a career where you can get to know, or rather where you can meet new people every single day. And that is recruiting, right? Same can be said for sales jobs and other things like that. But I think what has really enabled me to be super successful in my career is finding a strength where I get to use my number 1 strength, Woo, winning others over, every single day. And that's made a tremendous impact on my career, on my life, is understanding, number 1, like what my greatest strengths are and how I can best leverage those. But like positivity, discipline, maximizer, and consistency, those are my other 4. I see many other ways in which I get to use those as well. And so that would be my biggest advice for your listeners is, identify what your greatest strengths are and find a career where you can use those every single day.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Dalton, I'd love to share some of the strengths that I've seen in you over time as we've spent time together. Yeah. One of the things that I was really impressed with you, we had this opportunity that we had to hire a ton of product and tech folks, and so we ended up doing this this product and tech hiring day where we brought all of these folks in on site to the building at Pluralsight, and you actually led a big portion of that program or that hiring day. And you were fairly new to the company. You were just,
1 month.
1 month in. Yeah. But you were so determined to get in there and do it. And it was actually a really great process and program that we put together, because we were bringing in, pre-sourced, highly skilled talent. And then they would go through all their rounds of interviews, because we were going to ultimately make them an offer like that night or the next day,
Yeah.
and really move the hiring quickly. And at the end of all the interviews, we held these debrief sessions, and you're like, I want to drive this debrief session with all these leaders, and you did such an amazing job. And there was no fear about it. You were just right in there. You're very articulate, and you just made it happen. Like, that was like extremely impressive. But the other thing that you've mentioned even on the call today, like utilizing Loom to do videos out to candidates. I remember you talking about that Pluralsight as well.
Yeah.
And you're always coming up with different ways to innovate and different ways to look at the problem and to solve the problem in ways that makes more sense. Like disruption, like you're the disruptor, you're the recruiting and HR disruptor. And I love it because of the way that you think differently, and you think about, well, gosh, this would make a lot more sense. Like recruiting, people do process to recruiting the same, like generation after generation. But you look at it different and say, actually, there's a better way to do this, and we should try it. And so I love that about you. I love that innovative spark about you. And then maybe related to your woo, like you're just a really good, humble person, willing to help anybody, willing to go the extra mile, willing to do what it takes to help companies be successful. And your ability to retain knowledge and understand how businesses work. I remember when we sat down for breakfast a few months ago, and you were telling me about Neighbor and all the data that you're rattling off about the company and how it's working, like the supply and demand. Like you knew the company inside and out already, and it hadn't even been like a huge amount of time that you've been there. But it shows how much you care. It shows how much you're prepared. It shows, what you're going to do to help drive success at the company. So anyway, I could go on and on about all the awesome superpowers that you have, because you have a lot, but really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all of these great secrets and insights. I definitely think this is a masterclass in recruiting, that if people listen to this, they're gonna learn a lot. So thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I can just say, Jeremy, like I really appreciate you saying all those kind of things, about me, and working with you has been one of the highlights of my career. It takes great leaders like yourself to enable your employees, to like allow them the flexibility and creativity to be innovative and disruptive, right? And so I thank you for that. And as we close, I hope every job seeker, as you're evaluating your job search, is the number one most important thing is the leader that you work for. And so, find leaders that can enable you and empower you to be creative and disruptive. I think that's been one of the biggest differences in my career. So
Awesome.
Thank you for having me on, Jeremy. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. And then just lastly, where would we point people that want to come work for Neighbor? Where should we point them to go?
Yeah. Neighbor.com. Neighbor.com/careers is our careers website. We do have a couple positions that we're looking to fill. We actually are kind of venturing into this new element of our business called our commercial. We're working with actually other businesses to get their extra space on our platform, and to get business customers to rent space from Neighbor. And so we are looking for some salespeople and customer success professionals to help us in that effort. So if you're interested in those, in helping us, build that out, we'd love to talk to you.
Well, that's cool. So, anybody that wants an awesome, disruptive, exciting, innovative career, go check out Neighbor. Sounds like a great place to work. So awesome. Dalton, thanks so much for being on the show. We'll hope to have you back soon.
Hey, thanks so much, Jeremy.
All right. Take care. I'm really glad that Dalton Brough joined the show today. As you can see, he's got a wealth of knowledge. There's a lot to learn there. So make sure that you subscribe, leave a comment. Love to hear from you. And we'll see you on the next podcast.